Alright, in this video I want to talk about the mechanics of trill sounds, but we're talking about the mechanics of trill sounds. We're also going to talk about fricatives and approximants, because they are similar in some ways, and I think it's useful to understand that. So I'm just going to start off by just doing some, basically kind of a lot of the trill sounds. So just to sort of see what kind of goofy sounds that you guys can make. Obviously they're real sounds that exist in many languages, but using with these mechanics you can create tons of different types of sounds, right? So palatal trill, dorsal dental trill, dorsal alveolar trill, so those are some of the crazy ones. Some more generic or some more typical ones or easier ones to do would be the typical R trill, the alveolar trill. You can do that behind the teeth as well. You can pull it back even further. You can use the uvular trill. Velar trill. Bilabial. That kind of looks funny. Hold on. That's kind of funny looking. And then even a labiodental trill, teeth, upper teeth to the bottom lip. But this one's hard to do without assistance, by putting your finger to hold the lip a little. And we can also have some fun with doing some type of gradient with the trill, moving our tongue around. Okay. So that's just some demonstration. Again, a lot of those are not like practical sounds, but again, it just shows like the mechanic. It just demonstrates that the mechanics behind it, you can create a lot of these other silly, wild sounds, alien-like sounds, extraterrestrial sounds. So to start off, we're gonna, because before we make it to the trills, we gotta get some foundational knowledge first. And so I'm making this video in the context that anyone could listen. Basically, anyone could listen to this. The fricative sound is going to be the base from which we work to make a trill sound. So again, we're going to try to identify what exactly a fricative is. So compare the sounds S and T. So like a S sound and a T sound. For example, we can try to differentiate between them in words like sat, tat, sass, and tass. Try to extend those sounds as long as you can, right? Like sat, sass, for example, or sat, tat, tass, right? So clearly one thing that you probably are noticing is that you can extend the S basically forever, but you can't lengthen the T at all. And then I would, say try saying a cluster of these two sounds. Like in the word stats, you have it both ways. You got ST and TS. Really think about what's going on. Pay attention to what your tongue is doing when you say st, and likewise when you say ts, like in stat, ts. Okay, hopefully you just come to the conclusion that when you're making an S, there's a little bit of space for air to leave. When you're making a T, there's a complete closure. The air cannot escape at all. So that's the difference here. Plosives are these sounds that have those 100% closures. In English, there's 6 B, D. Or I'll make the sound b, d, g, t, d, k. But then when we get into fricatives, it's not just as simple as saying, a sound that lets air flow out of the mouth continuously, because there are different types of sounds that do that. For example, the Y sound in English, like ya, yo, that lets air out continuously, but it is not a fricative. And think about the name here, fricative and friction. So it's basically sounds that let air out, but also are very a lot of friction at the same time. So in English, there are 8 of them: s, z, f, v, th, the, sh, and j. Whereas the Y sound, very smoother sounding, is called an approximant, and the W is also an example of an approximant. Again, you can extend that W sound. Wa, wa, ya, ya. And so you can turn any plosive sound into a fricative by just letting some air through. So for example, the S and the T are the same thing basically, except for the S is a fricative version of the T. You could do that with the P, for example. You could turn a P into a fricative. P, p, f, f, f. Sounds like an F, but with 2 lips. With a normal F, we're doing like a f, f versus f, f. So that's just us turning in that P into a fricative. And again, you can do it with, the k sound as well. K, k, h, h, h. And on that same line of converting a sound into another sound, now we're going to talk about how to turn a fricative sound into an approximant sound. So there's really 2 things you got to do. The first thing is just you have to have a weaker airflow. That's one of the main differences, and the second difference is just the airflow gap. How much space you allow air to leave your mouth from. So with the plosives, there's no space. With the fricatives, there's a little bit of space, and with the approximants, there's a little bit more. So you have a weaker airflow with the approximants, and you have a bigger airflow gap. So just to hear this difference, we'll just go to Spanish for a second here. So in Spanish, the D sound will oftentimes be a fricative. Sometimes it'll be an approximant. Just based on the accent, based on the speaking context, the quickness of speech, but try to listen to this difference here. So I'm going to say fricative, and then I'm going to say the approximant, and then I'm going to say no consonant at all. So I'm going to put these sounds between 2 vowels, okay? So ado, alo, owl. I'll go again. Ado, alo, owl. So hopefully you can kind of hear the difference there between the fricative and the approximant. I'm also going to turn the English Y as another example to demonstrate the difference acoustically. Is turning the English Y into a fricative, because we can turn fricatives into approximants. We can also turn approximants into fricatives, and so you'll kind of be able to hear how it sounds different here. So if we say a word like yellow, 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 that's with an approximant, yellow. But if we turn into a fricative, it's going to sound more like yellow, 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 yellow. Another example could be yonder. So yonder, 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 yonder. So hopefully you can hear that difference there. So again, you can turn basically any fricative into an approximant. So you could turn the V, the English V, which is a fricative, va, into an approximant, va. So again, just weaker airflow. That's the main thing is weaker airflow. Because really what we're doing is we're getting rid of the friction or turbulent type sound. And to do that, we can reduce the airflow and we can make the airflow gap bigger. We can do both of them as well. But the goal really from that acoustic perspective is just to get rid of that friction. So even if you just do the V sound but reduce the airflow, so you go like va to la. So I can even gradient that, la, va, so I'm just changing the airflow there, the rate at which how strongly I'm pushing air out of my mouth. And this is an important concept for trills as well, so keep that in mind there. But the technique for which you reduce the friction will just depend on the sound. Some sounds it's more about reducing the airflow. Some sounds it's more about opening that air gap a little more. Now we'll get into turning fricatives into trills. So we could almost describe the approximant sounds as a weaker version of trills. A weaker version of fricatives. Trills are the opposite. We could describe trills as a stronger, more intense version of fricative sounds. So what do we need? Well, we need stronger airflow. That's one of the main things. And then the other one is really where it gives people a lot of trouble. And that's that for each different trill you need a specific tension level on what we call the active articulator, which for example in the your typical R type trill, the active articulator is the part of your mouth that rumbles when you're saying that sound. So your roof of your mouth doesn't rumble, but your tongue tip rumbles. So we call it the active articulator. And you need a specific tension in that. So it can't be too loose and it can't be too stiff. If it's too stiff, you're gonna get something like this. It's just it's not gonna rumble. And if it's too loose, you'll get something similar where it's not gonna rumble. It's not gonna vibrate. It's not gonna bounce around like you want it to. So that's probably the hardest thing about the trills. But what is easy to control is the airflow. So I'm gonna demonstrate doing that trill. This is the art. We'll start with I think the best way to go over this is with the bilabial trill, 2 lips. Now there's a couple ways to make this, right? The way that most people can intuitively make it is kind of like this. You're really tightening the corner of your lips, your corner of your mouth. But we're not going to do that because that doesn't help us understand the mechanics behind trills. So I want us to just have a super lax mouth. So we're not contracting anything in our lips. Our lips are just relaxed, okay? Relaxed as they can be. And what we're going to do, what I'm going to show right now, is how the airflow speed is going to change, or it's going to cause it to trill. So I have completely relaxed lips. I'm just going to I'm not holding my jaw tight, really. I'm just letting everything be relaxed. So as you see, obviously you're blowing. And as you blow quicker, eventually you can see it's starting to rumble. So at a certain point it starts to rumble when I'm pushing the air fast enough. So before you get into any of the different types of trills, I want you to be able to do that first. Once you're able to do the bilabial trill, where you're with no lip tension, then just try to do the tongue tip trills, where you're putting your tongue tip against some place in the roof of your mouth. I should mention the airflow gap, right? The airflow gap doesn't really matter that much, because the airflow gap will just oscillate as the active articulator is bouncing around and trilling. The only thing is you just don't want to start trying the trill with the gap too wide. So you want it to be. You can start anywhere. Like for example, I'll do a trill where I'm putting my tongue tip against the back of my teeth, and I can start this trill with the tongue tip fully against the back of the teeth. Now, I'm not pressing the back of my teeth; it's sort of just resting there. But again, I have an intuitive sense of what the correct tension is, and so it might be helpful for you to learn the tension this way, so you're kind of just it's kind of hard to show, but so let me try to show the difference between airflow gap and no airflow gap, right? So this will be airflow gap. So you can see that little gap there, and I can start a trill in this position, right? So I can start that trill, but I can also start it with no airflow gap. So it doesn't matter if there's an airflow gap or no airflow gap when you're starting. Again, if there's too much of an airflow gap, though, like I won't be able to start it. Now the first, I won't be able to start the trill. But like I said, you can try to start with no airflow gap, and you're just going to play with the tension. So for example, you can measure your tension by how hard you're pressing against your teeth. So if I press super hard, and maybe we'll see the tongue contract a little bit, right? So I think you can see the tongue contract a bit as I push against that. So let's try to trill with too much tension here. The amount of tension there, the air is just not able to even push the tongue tip off. Let's try with slightly too much tension. See, in that case, it doesn't want to maintain the trill. It'll start trilling, but it's just not going to maintain it. Now let's try perfect amount. Now let's try a little too weak. So you can see I'm even pushing super hard with the air, but the tension's too weak. So it's not gonna bounce back, because if the tension's too weak, it's gonna push away and it's not gonna push back. So let's try to understand why the intention is important now. Then, so if you're too tense, it's just not gonna. The air is never gonna. It's never gonna release it. The tongue tip's always gonna be touching, right? Whatever you're pressing against. Again, I'm pressing against the teeth because it's easy to demonstrate. But in most cases, your trill is gonna be, more on the fleshy part of the mouth, not the teeth. But so again, if it's too strong, right? If it's too strong, the tension's too strong. The air's not gonna be strong enough to consistently and repeatingly move it back, move the tongue tip off of whatever it's trying to smack. And if the tension's too weak, it's gonna move it off, but the tension's not strong enough for the tongue tip to actually go back. So getting the right tension allows it to get pushed off and come back. Because the tension's pushing it back, the air is pushing it off. So also again, if the airflow's too weak, it's not going to be able to push it off. That's why you need strong airflow as well. I think I already demonstrated the strength of airflow, but let's do the strength of airflow on the tip as well. Then. So I'm going to start with weak airflow. Again, my tension is going to be right. My tension is correct. But we're going from weak airflow to strong airflow. And now we'll go from strong to weak. So, tension, airflow, main things there. And, just like I said, when you turn a fricative into approximant, your strategy depends kind of which sound you're trying to do, which mouth parts are utilized to make that sound, right? Are you reducing the airflow more? Are you reducing that airflow gap more? Versus with the trills, the how strong you need to push the air really depends on the type of trill sound. So I'm going to try to demonstrate this by doing the trill and then having way too much airspace so it won't trill, but you'll hear the airflow. So we'll start with one that requires practically none, which is the bilabial, which is the you're not, the bilabial trill, but you're not, contracting your lips at all. You're not pursing your lips or whatever, right? So that's the airflow it requires. So hopefully you can hear that in the camera. Now, one that requires a lot of airflow would be what we call the palatal trill. One of them I demonstrated at the top of the video, or the beginning of the video. So So hopefully you can kind of hear that one needs more airflow than the bilabial, and that's just because of how tense the tongue body is. I use it as a tongue body, like the tongue hump, weird tongue humps, right? Like someone like there. That goes against the roof of the mouth and bounces. But that's a lot more tense than the lips. The lips are very loose, super loose. And so, yeah, tensions can be different by each sound as well. But again, so to get the trills, I would, again, understand the mechanics through the bilabial trill first. Do exercises, at the end of the day, articulation or making sounds is neuromuscular, just like dancing is, okay? Just like any physical skill is. This is a physical skill, and so try to develop competence and control by doing types of exercises. So with like the bilabial, you want to be, you know, just controlling the airflow, right? And just, you know, you want it to be where your airflow starts too weak that it's not trilling, and then it incrementally rises where it starts to trill in the same breath. And then again, you want to try this with just all of them that you want to be able to make. I'm not saying that you should, you know, be able to, you know, do all these crazy ones that I'm doing, you know, because most of these aren't actually used in languages, but it develops competence. So if you want to do the r one, you do the same thing, right? Start weak and then get strong. So hopefully, again, if you guys have any questions, leave comments below, and I'll, you know, do my best to address them. But other than that, hopefully this video was informative, helpful in some way, you know. All right, I'm out. Peace.